economics of regulation module, given the possibility that some students will be offline and some students will be face-to-face on campus next year. What I'm really conscious of is that when I move to what's been a fairly interactive but face-to-face course, I'm moving to what I think of as an adaptable blended approach. I really want to think about how to engage students who are working offline on what I now know is called asynchronous material, and also when we do have online sessions, be they through Blackboard, Collaborate or Zoom, how I'm going to create a class community in my module. So one of the first things I decided to do was to focus on a problem that people will be familiar with. So we have a topic on privatisation, and I'm going to start with an example, which is the problem of British Railways. And what I want to do is use that example to think about, are the problems there because of private ownership? And the way I'm going to sort of structure this topic is, first of all, I'm going to give students clear tasks to do before we have a live class. Class is about 60 people. So I'm planning on running it as a sort of lecture that's shorter than normal, but a very much a discussion lecture. Hoping to use breakout sessions and also the chat on Blackboard Collaborate, which we have built into Moodle. So before the lecture, what I want them to do is to read some background data and watch a video, which is very short, and use video. I've set up a discussion forum so they can contribute examples. My students come from all over the world. We'll be very much focused on Great Britain railways. I'm looking for examples from other countries. I haven't done this yet, be pre-recording some videos on the economic theory of privatisation. So they'll have the models that they need to understand to give economic arguments around this topic. I have created a wiki, which I've started, but I want them to add to provide evidence on the pros and cons from their own research about privatisation in railways. I need to decide whether this needs to be assessed to incentivise them to contribute. I've also started, what I plan on doing is having in different topics or different problems of privatisation. So the first one I've identified is the problem of quality of service, including congestion on railways or in trains. So to motivate this topic, I've developed a Pinterest board with pictures of very packed trains in lots of different countries. And you'll see that I've asked students to add to that board with their own images. And then I do something similar for 3 or 4 other problems associated with private ownership. And then the plan would be that once they've worked through all those materials, we'd have a live discussion with breakout groups. And so I give them like 2 weeks to work on those materials. So just to illustrate what this looks like, I'll go to my Moodle page, which hopefully will show up here. At the moment, I've got this in student view. So there's a tab called Rail Privatisation Great Britain. You can see that I'm giving them some data on usage of the railways. This is the video from Channel 4, sort of around the time of the election in the end of 2019, when the Labour government were talking about nationalising the railways, so looking at the problems of the railways. And here I've provided a link from Pearl Trees, which is offering me a free upgrade on different websites that students might find useful. So the different regulatory websites for the Rail Regulation, the Department for Transport, and the Passenger Focus Group. So hopefully that's something that they will find useful. And it opens up as a different window. We go back here. So that's useful regulation sites. I've invited them to add their own. I'm hoping that that will work. So that was useful. I've never heard of Pearl Trees before. It was nice to find that. This is where I've set up the discussion forum. You'll see I've given some instructions. So I've asked them to say where they live and whether the rail industry where they live is owned by the government or the private sector. I've said I expect every student to make one post. And I've asked them that if somebody's already mentioned the country they're from, that they can add to that thread rather than starting a new thread. and also they should feel free to add links. So they just need to add a discussion forum. I've made this an non-anonymized discussion forum so I can see who's saying what, as I found that's better for students to behave themselves in the type of comments that they make, and so I can see who has contributed. This is my Moodle Wiki, which is about the benefits and downsides of government ownership. I put in some arguments, and I've asked every person in the class to edit the wiki by providing their own thoughts. Can relate to railways anywhere in the world. Said they can put in anything, so articles, videos, podcasts, embed data. And I've explained to them briefly how to create a new page in the wiki, which from my experience is the only thing that students struggle with. So when they click in it, this is the wiki they see, they can edit it. So all I did was create some pages for the Great Britain perspective, the Ireland perspective. Somebody can click on the Great Britain perspective and create the page, and then they can edit away and add some pros and cons in there themselves. So that's the wiki that I've created. Still not quite sure whether I'm going to assess these things. The moment they're not part of my assessment, so I need to understand whether I can make changes in a hurry on this. And then, as I mentioned in my introduction, I want to have a sort of series of different what's the potential problems in the railway. So one is quality of service. Provided a link to a P-interest site where they can see a board, just pictures of lots of packed trains in the UK, in Germany, India, much older era. And I shall be providing the students with a link by email to add to that board, which I've told them to. And again, I need to think about how I'm going to incentivize them to contribute. I'm hoping when they see me using some of these tools in the live session that they will see that people who contribute can see their contributions being used, which will be useful. At the end of this topic, they will have an assignment, which will be a presentation on essentially answering the big question, is privatisation the problem with GB railways? And I'm hoping that, like me, they'll make use of some of the online tools like Sway or Prezi. And it'll be groups. So I think in class of 60, I'm hoping to have about probably 12 to 15 groups, 4 or 5 people. I need to think about if they're all over the world time zone issues with how they work. So hopefully I might have some way of working out where they are when they do this. So that's where I've got to. I've no idea how my students, so these will be final year undergraduate students, will cope with this. It's certainly a very different way to having me standing in front of them for 2 hours talking about a topic and then them doing some reading. But I'm quite excited about it.